Hi folks, welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Thank you all for stopping by to watch. This morning we're going to talk about, how to survive by moving to the country. This has been an ongoing theme of this channel since pretty much the beginning, that your best bet for survival with all the stuff that's happening, and if you've learned anything over the last couple of years, living in a big urban, highly condensed population is just not the best way to survive. And I know it's tough. I know it causes a lot of hardship at first and a lot of, decisions to make and sacrifices to make. But living in a rural country environment is by far your best way to survive. And we're going to talk about that here in just a minute on kind of how to do it and what you're going to get yourself into. It's not easy. I get it. And I get emails all the time, almost every day, from people asking about, moving out into the country, what's it like, how to do it, what to expect, what's the cost, what's the first things you need to do. And it's not easy, okay? But here's how I look at it. You have two choices. If you live in a urban, suburban environment, in a city, it's easy right now. Everything's pretty easy. You don't have to do a whole lot. You mow your yard in the summer, or you have someone do it, and that's about it. But as the times get worse, as the collapse becomes more and more prevalent, that's when your hardships come in. And your hardships at that point are really interfering with your survival. It's really going to depend on whether you survive or not, living in that suburban and urban environment, because things just aren't as easy then. Things are more dangerous. It's going to be harder to live, harder to be self-sufficient. Whereas moving to the country, and if you do that now, or if you've done that recently, the hardships, the sacrifices are immediate. That's what you have to do right now. It's going to be tough for the initial part of it. But when things get bad, and as the collapse becomes more real, that's when you realize that what you're doing isn't as hard. So you have a choice of having easy right now and hard later, or going through the tough parts now and having an easier and a better chance to survive later. Something I've always noticed in a lot of media, in the entertainment world, and even in the Bible, there's always this assumption, this indication, and these references that the wickedness, the evilness, the danger, the threat is always in the cities. And it seems so funny that the peacefulness, the place to go and survive, the place that will save you, is always out in the country. Even in the Bible, almost every prophet that I can think of throughout the Bible, they would leave the cities, or they would go into the wilderness to make a connection with the Father. This is not just a coincidence, folks. So leaving the cities is really, it's really the best, and it may end up being the only way to truly survive with everything that we're being faced with right now and what's coming down the pike. So you've got to get out. You've got to get out, and for those of you that have pulled the trigger and you've moved, maybe you've moved over the last year or two, and you're out there trying to eke out your survival out on the land. It's not like it was a couple of 100 years ago, but in comparison, a lot of ways it can be, and it can be tough. And there are things that you have to do and things that you have to give up to make it work. Our little story here on this property, we moved here just before all of this health crisis, global health crisis hit. We lived in the country and had a piece of property elsewhere, and we found this one. We'd been wanting to move, and we found this one, and it was just better. It was just a better piece of property, better for really living off the land and self-sufficiency. And so we had heard, we'd been watching the stuff that was going on in China, and it was just in the beginning. And I told my wife, I said, if we're going to do this, we need to do it now. We need to do this now before this thing starts to explode and get big. And so we did. And we made the move and we purchased this place before all that happened. All the craziness here in the United States happened. And as we've seen since then, land prices have skyrocketed all over the place. And things have gotten crazy. And so that's one of the first things you need to do is remember, you've got to pull the plug now. Land prices last year were horrible. And it seems like that they've come down a little bit. I'm still seeing, just the other day, I was just kind of looking just out of curiosity in my general area. And when I say that, I mean within about an hour drive of where I live. And I saw some places that were still priced ridiculously high like they were, last year. And then I saw several places that were priced almost down to what would be considered normal here in the Ozarks. And so it is coming down. I've spoken with real estate agents, and they feel that, especially here in the Ozarks, that land prices will continue to go back down to that normal state, as long as something big doesn't happen, another lockdown or some big crash in the economy. We'll see those land prices, because out here, that's part of the reason that these places are selling and land is selling, is because people, and this is true anywhere out in the country, people in the cities and stuff are realizing they need to have a backup plan. They need to have something to fall back to. And so they're purchasing properties out in the country. When we moved here, there wasn't really anything here. This wasn't a farm. This was a hunting property. And so there really wasn't much here, and it wasn't what most people would consider livable. And so we made the decision, because we had an RV to live in, that because we had a place to live, even though it was temporary, we would focus on other things to build the property to make sure that it was survivable. And so basically what we did is we took care of animal shelters, fencing, garden spaces, so that we could have in place, our priority was to get in place things that would help us survive. We felt we had a roof over our head. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't what we wanted, but it was still a roof over our head. And what we needed to focus on, instead of immediately building us a house or something like that, was to put our energy and money into building the infrastructure around us that would help us survive. And so that's what we did. We laughed at one point that we had more money invested in animal shelters and fencing than probably what the house that we were living in was worth. And that's not too unusual for a lot of folks that live out like this. And so that's something that you need to remember is your priorities. When you make that move, and when you make that purchase, is make sure you set up your priorities. Maybe you already have a house on the property, and so that's easy. And of course you want to have some kind of shelter and some kind of home for you to live in. But a lot of people, too many times when they purchase land, is they immediately go into building a big nice house for them to live in. And then they neglect, focusing on animal shelters, focusing on gardens, things like that. And what happens if something happens and you're not able to do that? Like I said, we put that focus in first. And within months after us doing that, just a few months, lumber prices started skyrocketing. Things started getting hard to get. That's when things started getting locked down. And we were sitting back thinking, man, if we had only waited just a couple of months, 2 or 3 months, to do a lot of these projects, our cost would have gone way up, and we may not have even been able to finish some of it, because the availability of some things started getting really, really bad. And so that's one of the things you have to do, is to when you're making these moves, when you're getting out, it's kind of like bugging out. You got to be ahead of the curve. You've got to kind of think ahead and set your priorities straight. That having food is highly important. Having security is highly important. And having a big house with all the bedrooms and all the bathrooms and all the furnishings that you want may not be the highest priority that you should have. When you're doing this, like I said, food, water, and security, those are really the highest priorities once you have a shelter. And again, remember, modern Western Americans have this concept that shelter has to be something super nice. We lived in an older RV. It was totally functioning. It was actually in pretty good shape for its age, but it was an older RV. And we felt that that was just good enough for us to live in for a while until we got the other things set up. And so that's what we did. I think that this is very critical for people when they're making this move of getting out, finding them a place. Getting out of the cities is really, I think, a very critical thing. I understand you can survive in the cities if you do it right. I'm not saying you can't. I'm not saying that you'll perish if you stay there. I'm saying that if you stay there, it's going to be a lot harder on you. I mean, you can't have the things that we have out here. You can't have animals and chickens and sheep and large gardens and have your own heating supply growing in your woods and things like that. Water from your creeks and your wells. In the city, once things start collapsing, once infrastructure start going down, you go down with it. So you've got to make some serious decisions, and then when you get out, you've got to put your skills to the test, and you've got to work hard. There's nothing easy about living like this, and then you have to, I think, break the. I'm not even sure what to call it, but there's this kind of idea in the modern world of how things should be on a little hobby farm. There's all kinds of little TV shows and stuff, and of how to make it all cute and make it nice. You need to focus on make it survivable. If you're watching your HGTV or whatever it's called, and they're showing you how to make a nice little raised bed garden, that may be nice, but is it something that you could survive out of? We have a little over 10,000 square foot garden space. And I can tell you that for right now, that's more than enough. I mean, that we get plenty of food out of that garden. But I know that if we have to completely survive out of that garden, it's not enough, which is why this year our plan is to expand it by about 25%. We know that that's just not enough for us to survive completely and solely out of. The same thing with animals. We have animals, and they're producing good for us, but is it enough for us to survive? Probably not. And so while we have things set up for us to kind of do and kind of get by, our plan is to continually expand, because most people aren't aware of the fact that it takes actually quite a bit for you to really survive. It takes a pretty large garden. If your garden space is 10 foot by 10 foot, it's nice. It's a good supplement to your diet, but you're not going to be able to survive out of a 100 square foot garden space. If you look up on Google of how much garden space you should have per family member, it'll tell you around 200 square foot. Don't listen to it. That's not enough. That's enough to add some garnishment and some tomatoes to your sandwich every once in a while. That's not enough to live out of. So take it serious, folks. And as you're doing this, getting out of the cities and getting out of these places of violence and stuff, you need to do it quick. If you're going to do it, you need to pull the trigger and get out before things continue to get bad. If you're waiting on getting out until you start to see things really crumble and really fall apart, it's going to be too late at that point. Prices will be too high. Properties won't be available. Already, even now, I hear that most decent properties, they sell within just a few days. You have to be fast to get them. And then the ability to actually go out there and develop the property, that's going to take time. It's not easy. It's not something you're going to do overnight. Even if you have the money to do it, it's going to be hard. And so you want to have that stuff set up as much as you can in advance. So again, I'm not being critical of those of you that live in the cities or those of you that's going to continue to live in the cities. I'm telling you, for those of you that are wanting to make that move, that's how to survive, to do it fast and to get out and plan on plan on putting a lot of work into the property and a lot of work into developing it into a producible, piece of property, something that you can have a decent harvest from. Because surviving off of the land is very different than just, having a garden space and a few animals to supplement your diet. It's going to take a lot more work than you think, but it's well worth it, because that work is what you do in the beginning, and so that you can reap the benefits afterwards, versus, like I said, living in the city where your benefits come in the beginning, where it's nice and easy, and you have to do all the work to barely survive in the end. So folks, again, I'm not being critical of those of you that can't do it, but it's definitely your best chance of survival. And for those of you that are able to, that even think that there's a possibility that you're able to, don't you want to provide the best chance for you and your family by doing this? So when you do make this change, and when you do pull the trigger and you do move out, expect a lot of work. But in the end, it will be well worth it. All right, folks, thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.